Welcome to the Recommended Daily Value Podcast, your daily dose into the health and wellness world.
Welcome back to the Recommended Daily Value Podcast, where we dive into everything health, fitness, and nutrition related 5 days a week in 5 minutes or less. This podcast is brought to you by Umzu, and I'm your host, Tyler Woodward. I'm really excited for this episode because today we're talking about good old evolution. I really enjoy thinking about things through an evolutionary perspective, so I hope you all enjoy this little tale I'm going to tell that I like to call the story of the cell. But before we dive in, make sure to hit that subscribe button. I really appreciate it. So we often like to view evolution on the macro scale. How did humans evolve from monkeys, whales from dolphins, etc.? But by doing this, we overlook the micro scale of how our cells have advanced over time, allowing these infinitely more complex organisms to come into existence. Just as all modern humans have a common ancestor, so do our cells. The story of how these modern day cells came into existence is interwoven into our story itself. A lot of this episode is based on Bruce Lipton's biology of belief, so I'm going to steal his analogy in that we are just a sum of our cells. Every single action, emotion, or thought that we feel can be broken down to the cellular level. In this light, cells function just like little people. Every cell is capable of performing the same overarching functions as a person, including respond to a stimulus like food or light, reproduce, grow and develop, maintain homeostasis or balance with its external environment, and process or metabolize energy. Our cells just do so on a much smaller scale. Instead of having organs, our cells are made up of many organelles, and many of the functions of these organelles parallel our own organs. The nucleus is like the brain of the cell. It stores genetic information. Cytoplasm is like the blood, the intracellular fluid. Mitochondria is like the heart, the site of metabolism or respiration. Cellular membrane is like the skin. It regulates what enters and exits the cell. One of the defining characteristics in both the advancement of life at a cellular level and humans at a societal level could be considered the specialization of labor. When every person in the tribe no longer needed to produce their own food, you could instead hone your own skills as a seamstress, carpenter, or blacksmith, whatever it is, and trade for whatever commodity you required. This allowed for rapid progress as a society as individuals and families advanced within their own trade, promoting better products over time. The same idea can be thought of with organisms today. The cells of our heart have the same blueprints as the cells of our brain, but they are just much more specialized with various proteins and organelles. And the same thing happened with the first cells just billions of years ago. The first cells were very primitive in structure. Over time, these cells advanced, developing new organelles like flagella, which is a whip-like structure they use to propel themselves. More complex membrane proteins that allow the cell to regulate what is able to enter and exit the cell, and to help them to better respond to the environment and adapt to the environment. These cells eventually evolved to be able to convert sunlight into energy through a process known as photosynthesis. The shift eventually led to an oxygenated atmosphere, allowing for cells to develop more advanced methods of energy production or metabolism through aerobic respiration, or using oxygen. Eventually, as these cells continue to advance and grow, it is believed that a larger cell basically swallowed a smaller cell, and these cells merged together. This is known as the endosymbiotic theory. These swallowed cells would eventually become the first mitochondria and chloroplast. And these were the first eukaryotic cells, the direct ancestors of our modern day cells. And at some point down the line, these cells ran into an obstacle. They could only grow so big. Remember, cells don't have a heart or anything to pump nutrients around them. So these cells turned to their neighbors, developing more complex membrane proteins to communicate with nearby cells, and then also regulating what could enter and exit that cell. These connections eventually turned into the first communities of living things, and provided an active network of intercellular communication. These communities continue to grow over time, from a few cells linked together to millions and eventually billions of cells. As these communities grew, it allowed these cells to work together instead of as individuals, distributing the workload across the community, just like how humans began to specialize in labor. In many ways, this is what life consists of today. Every one of our biological systems all starts out with a single cell. Hundreds or even thousands of these cells are grouped together to form tissues, which combine to form our organs and finally our organ systems. Ultimately, this results in an end product, an organism just like you and I. The cells at a fundamental level remain somewhat the same. All have the same DNA or genetic building blocks, same organelles, but they each specialize in various functions. For instance, some cells have more mitochondria for energy production, others have more lysosomes to fight off foreign invaders, while others have lots of protein-making factories, which we call the endoplasmic reticulum. One of the fundamental issues of biology today is viewing the evolution of life solely through the progression of genetic material, aka your genes or DNA. But this neglects that our cells respond as a whole to their environment, determining what proteins are produced, whether fuel is burned or conserved, or what nutrients are absorbed based on its internal and external environment. meaning that the story of our evolution and our complexity is not found in our genes, but rather in our cell's ability to respond to its environment. This has stayed true from the first unicellular organisms to our modern-day cells. The difference between us and these single cellular organisms is that we are capable of controlling our environment, including our external or macro environment, the outside world, and our internal cellular environments or conditions. Only when you understand how to control your own environment can you truly understand what you are capable of and reach your potential, which will continue with the next episode with Bruce Lipton's incredible book, The Biology of Belief. Well, that's it for this episode. So remember, if you enjoyed this episode, to make sure to hit that subscribe button and share with a friend. And remember, these opinions are my own, based on my own research and experiences, and is not medical advice. Till next time, be good.